Have you ever thought to yourself, I was just never quite the same after that accident? Or maybe after a concussion, a fall, a sports injury, or some sort of type of whiplash event. And if so, you are not alone. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that because an injury happened a long time ago, that it can't still be affecting them today. But that's not always true. Time passing is not quite always the same thing as time healing. And a lot of people adapt after an injury, and the adaptation can look a lot like recovery from the outside. Maybe you were able to get back to work, maybe you pushed through, maybe even the severe pain calmed down, but you still never felt fully normal again. See, our body can compensate and put us into patterns to potentially keep us out of pain, but those patterns aren't always optimal. So maybe, your neck hurts a little bit and you find if you kind of lean over this way, it hurts a little bit less, or your low back hurts. And again, maybe if you just don't bend a certain way, it won't hurt more. Or maybe you get dizzy and you just learn how to not move your neck as much and you move your shoulders more. And maybe since then, you've also had more headaches, more neck tension, more dizziness, more brain fog, poor sleep, visual strain, and a sense that your body just does not handle stress the same way. And a lot of people never connect their current symptoms back to the original injury just because so much time has passed. But the body is incredibly good, again, at compensating. And in the short term, that's not always a bad thing. It helps you survive. It helps you keep moving. But the problem is compensation is not always the same as restoration, and it's certainly not optimal. In other words, your body may have figured out how to function around the injury without ever fully resolving the deeper issue and the deeper patterns of compensation. And that is especially important when we were talking about things like whiplash, concussions, falls, sports impacts, car accidents, and old neck injuries. Heaven knows, here in Colorado, we see a lot of that. Somebody comes in and says, oh yeah, I had that big ski wreck a couple of years ago, fell down a bunch of moguls. It hurt a lot at the time, but a couple days or a couple weeks later, I was totally fine. Yet they're coming in with a pattern that exhibits that they've had some major trauma to their spine. One of the most overlooked areas in trauma is the upper neck. The upper neck plays a major role in posture, movement, balance, and the way that we process spatial and neurological information. So when someone tells me, I've never been quite the same since that accident, or ever since that concussion, I get headaches, tension, dizziness, that is something I take very seriously. Now, that does not mean every symptom years later is automatically caused by the old injury, but it does mean the injury should not be ignored just because it happened a long time ago. One of the most common things I see in the office is old injuries rearing their ugly heads again. Not because they necessarily even got re-injured, although that happens a lot of times as well, but because an old injury plus time in a bad position, compensating, not having ideal or optimal structural alignment, and then other smaller issues on top. Now, maybe you sit at a desk for 10 hours a day typing at a keyboard, or you're driving your kids around in the car playing, taxi mom. And over time, those old issues seem to keep coming back more and more. And a lot of times they come back more and more consistently, meaning there's less time in between the pain, and the pain goes on for longer periods. At our office, we look carefully at the full story: your history, your symptoms, your old injuries, your structural patterns and compensation patterns, and whether there may still be unresolved issues affecting your nervous system and your alignment. The goal is not to guess. The goal is to understand whether an old injury is still part of the current pattern that you're in right now. And if you've been saying, I just was never quite the same again after that, pay attention to that instinct. You may not need more guesswork. You may just need a specific evaluation. You may just need a more specific evaluation. In our office, we call it neurostructural testing. It's a very thorough evaluation for all of our new patients. We 18 points, meaning we do 18 different assessments looking at neurological function, posture, motion in your spine, and structural alignment. That tells me a lot about how the health of your spine is affecting the health of your body. I'm Dr. Norris Golberg with Koru Chiropractic here in Louisville, Colorado. And if that sounds like your story, our office may be a good place to start.